This lecture is about inclusive physical education, and although we deliver all of our physical education in an inclusive way, I like to run a session where we can focus on specific issues, especially as some of these students now are about to go out on their final teaching practice, so they're going to be experiencing teaching mixed ability classes and hopefully delivering some physical education during the summer term. So the session really is looking at generic strategies of how you can make your teaching inclusive right from the word go, including all pupils, trying to get them to understand it's not just about children with additional learning needs, but about all children in their class, because many children wouldn't be identified with additional learning needs but still struggle to access physical education for a range of reasons. Right, okay, thanks for coming along. Today's session, what I'm hoping to do is, by the end of the session, you'll have developed an understanding of the issues of inclusion in relation to physical education. And during our practical, we're going to explore a range of generic strategies to try and make the PE that you do in school more inclusive for all pupils. Okay, so that's where we should be at the end of the lecture. So first of all, I'm going to start off with, I want you to do a little task for me. I've got some definitions of inclusion. They're quite well-known definitions. And I'd like you in sort of groups of 3 or 4 to look at the 4 definitions I've got in here and see if you can identify some key themes and key issues that are appearing right through the different definitions, and you pass them back to the back row. So I don't mind how you group up in your little groups, but see if you can find sort of same words appearing, same sort of meaning, same definitions, what themes are occurring all the way through. Feel free to discuss.
But it's not just tolerance, it's more than tolerance, it's kind of building that, embracing it almost, a difference rather than just accepting it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so let's look at some of those. What are the key things that you're finding coming out then? What sort of words are you seeing reoccurring?
I think the process is described in all of it. It's an ongoing process, and assessment's linked with that as well. It's not a one-off activity as such. It's an ongoing thing where all the staff are involved, and also to do with the diversity of the children as well. It needs to be an inclusive project with all the staff in the school to make sure that everybody knows what's going on and the system's the same throughout the setting.
All right, so process definitely is it's not something like you say, it's not a one-off thing, is it? It's something that's happening all the time. A process, and you said that involved all the staff. So it's not something that you as a teacher isolate in your class, oh, I've got this pupil, I'm going to just include them. It should be something that's happening right the way through everything that's going on in the school. Another word you picked up there, did anyone else pick it up? Diversity. All right, and one of the other definition I did put up there was Mittler's on. I liked it because it's about welcoming and celebrating diversity. And every single one of you've either just come off a teaching practice or just starting a new one now. The children in your class are very diverse, aren't they? All of them. So there's no way that you can say, oh, this child fits into this compartment or that one. Everyone in that class is going to have a diverse range of needs. So these definitions, they recognise that it's a process, that it's about diversity. Anything else you think that jumps out to that for you?
You should be able to differentiate for every child because we've all got individual learning needs.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be a radical reform, it should be in place already.
Okay, so you think by saying radical that it shouldn't be happening. If you look, that's back in 2000, and I think for a lot of schools, and possibly still today, to make sure that everything you do is inclusive, maybe you are looking at a radical for some people. But not, as you say, it shouldn't be a radical reform. It should be part of what schools do. Schools have inclusion policies, don't they? So it should be there. Anything else?
It talks a lot about value system of the school or the culture of the school, or there's something else, isn't it? But it's really the whole ethos of the school, the whole approach, really.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant word, ethos, because usually you can feel it, can't you? When you walk into a school, you can feel that ethos. Is it making you feel welcome? Do you think the children are valued? And that can't be just in isolated classes. That comes from the whole school being part of what you identified there as a process. So in light of that, one of the things that people often highlight is that if you want to include children in physical education, one of the things is, well, how do I include children with special educational needs? But what I want you to try and think up beyond from looking at those definitions, we're not talking just about children with special educational needs, are we? We're talking about the whole school and the way it approaches all learners.
So if we're talking about that, we really are thinking about moving from the language of special educational needs, which historically was a medical issue, wasn't it? It was a medical definition of special needs, was where the problem was with the child, the person's got a problem, they've got such and such a condition, and it's their issue. Well, if we're talking about inclusion, we need to be recognising what we call environmental models, which is where actually the only thing that is a barrier to someone being included is the environment that they're in. So it's not the child, it's not the child in the wheelchair that can't get into the building, is it? What is it that prevents them? It would be the steps, it's the environment. So what you have to do as teachers is think about, how do I deliver the whole of my PE to ensure that those barriers aren't there if I'm going to be inclusive? Otherwise you're just integrating someone into something that already exists, and there's a difference, isn't there? The difference is, if I've got this is my programme of study in PE, and I've got a child coming in who's got some form of physical disability, or I'm just going to alter this lesson a bit to allow them to do that activity in a different way. That's not the same as thinking, well, actually, there's a range of children, and this might be one of them that maybe isn't accessing it. So I have to think about what my whole programme of PE is. And if you look back at those definitions again, you know, it talks about the appropriate curricular, organisational arrangements, teaching strategies, resources. So it's talking about the whole thing. Because in a session as long as this one, I can't teach you all the things, the strategies you could do for a child with visual impairment or a child with cerebral palsy or with all those things. But actually, if you teach in an inclusive way in PE, you hardly have to make many adaptations. You will be making fine little tweaks and fine-tuning what you're doing already. Yeah, and for those children, when we talk about, and you will have heard this, won't you, already, that what we do for children with special education needs actually is good for all children. So if we try to forget that, talking about what we do for this type of child, and just think about good inclusive practice, you're going to be helping all children in their PE, we hope. So what I want to do with you now is some practical stuff, and I'm going to do a couple of different practical sessions, and through doing those, what we're going to do is we're going to identify what some of the barriers are to children accessing PE. We're going to think about, well, who are all those children that are struggling to access PE? Who might they be, those pupils in the class? And then we're going to look at, right, okay, if those are the barriers and these are what we need to do, how are we going to do that in a practical way? Okay? Happy? Ready to do some moving about? It's important that the students can experience the things that I'm talking about in a practical way. Otherwise, it's difficult for them to realise what it's like to handle and use a range of equipment. They can actually experience how much easier it is to develop their striking skills if they're using bigger, slower equipment, and then they'll have more empathy for the children that they're working with. So I always try and incorporate some practical activities in with some of the theory as well. Right, when I deliver this activity, I want you to listen to the language and the way that it's delivered, because we're going to have a discussion then after about how it was delivered and what you thought about that. So what we're going to learn now is we're going to learn a chest pass for netball. So first of all, we're going to get ourselves warmed up a bit. So I want you to start, first of all, by just jogging slowly. Use all of the space. Don't bump into anyone. Are you ready? And off you go. So just jogging slowly. Use all the space. Nice and light on your feet. Don't bump into people. Okay, when I shout out right, I want you to touch the floor with your right hand, left, your left, both of them. Keep going, keep running. Right. Keep running. Left. Both. And stop. Okay, you all feeling warmed up? Okay, what I'd like to do is get with a partner, find a partner, stand next to them, please. Then I'd like each pair to collect a netball from one of these two bags here. Just a netball, please, from one of these two bags. Okay, so come and collect a netball, one between two and into a space. Netball or a basketball will do. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to learn the chest pass. So for a chest pass, you need to have two hands on the ball. Does anyone else know how you do a chest pass? Hands behind it, and you're going to push the ball to your partner. Can you have a go at that for me first? Off you go. Push the ball with a nice pass. Two hands behind it. Good, and stop. Okay, so it should be a nice, powerful pass. How can we make that more powerful? Extend our arms and step forward. Let's try that then. So we're going to step as we pass it and push the ball, extending our arms to our partner. Really hard. Nice and powerful. in the bag. And if you just come down and sit down on the floor here a minute, we'll have a little bit of feedback about that. It's only a short little activity. How many of you have seen netball happening in schools? Seen netball? Have you seen children learning some of the skills, doing some drills, learning how to do it? Okay. I just want you to think about how that felt. Now, I know a lot of you are adults and you're fairly active, but how did that feel when I'm making you run around quite vigorously at the start and I didn't keep going too long? You were fine with that. You probably play a lot of sport. You okay with that? Touch your hand right, touch the floor right, left, okay? Two hands, okay? You're okay?
I have trouble with my right and left.
Yes,
Okay. So not everybody's so happy with that. What about the children in your classes in school then? Would all pupils be able to access that activity, do you think?
No.
Okay, who might not be able to access that?
Someone with a loss of limb.
Okay, someone with a loss of limb. So, because what do you have to do for a chest pass? Two hands on a ball. Because we're learning a specific skill, aren't we, for a sport. So we're learning a skill for netball. It's a recognised skill. We need to do it. So in order to do that chest pass, you have to be able to hold the ball with two hands and propel that ball quite fast, accurately. Our partner who has to be able to catch that coming towards them. Now, if you can't do that, you can't do a chest pass. So I'm using an extreme version by giving a very specific skill, but we do see children in PE being taught skills for particular sports. Now, the minute that you're teaching that in a way like that, you're maybe excluding certain pupils. Okay? We know that obesity is increasing in schools, increasing in primary schools. If I'm making you run and run and run and run, touch the floor one hand, touch the floor the other, touch with both, and you have a weight problem as a small child, you're going to be exhausted, very quickly excluded from that activity. I'm not saying that children don't need vigorous activity, of course they do, but it needs to be done in a way that allows them to take part without feeling exhausted, without being put off it. If you can't run, what did I ask you to do? Jog and run. So if you can't jog and you can't run, that's excluding you. All right? If you can't use two hands, that's excluding you. If you've got poor coordination, and this is flying towards you, how soft is that? Have any of you ever been hit on the nose with a netball? Yeah. Stubbed a finger on it? Or a basketball? Okay, it's really unpleasant, isn't it? So for small children with poor coordination, if that flies towards you, what you're going to end up with in your lesson is lots of children who this comes, so they go like that. Pick it up and then pass it to someone. And then it comes towards them again, they go, pick it up. So how well are they improving their coordination? They're not practicing their catching at all, are they? So I know that's an extreme example, but I just wanted to illustrate to you how the use of language, the use of equipment, can alter the accessibility of an activity. So let's think about who those people are, and let's think about the barriers. If you can get into little groups of, say, 4, I'm going to give you a flip chart and a pen, and I want you to make a list of who you think is being excluded from those sorts of activities. So if we're very skill specific and we're coaching in a way like that, who is going to be in danger of being excluded? Oh, do you want to go and grab the little pot pens up on my laptop and give a pen to each group? I've got a list that's in a handout for you, and I'm going to see how many you can get from this list. We'll go through it. See how many you can get. People that you think. So, for example, you've already mentioned children, people with a loss of limb. So that's one. Children, you mentioned children with poor coordination is another one. So start jotting them down. See how many you can come up with on your list.
Yeah, I think so. It's from that.
Okay, especially think back to your teaching practices. Think of your school experience, of any children you thought, actually, if I'd have done that, they'd have struggled to be part of that session.
There's a child in one of my classes whose parents just didn't want him to take part in it because...
Okay, so parental objection, that's definitely an issue. Okay, let's have some feedback. I'm going to go through, I've got a list which is on a handout for you for the end. Referenced by Claudia Coburn, who does a lot of work on inclusion and research in that, and her website and the references are on your handout. Okay, so see if you've got some of these, because I can see lots of them coming through and you get the idea. Children with disabilities, yes? Mm-hmm. Learning difficulties. Coordination disorders. Behavioural difficulties, EBD. Overweight stroke underweight. Did you have both? Because we hear so much in the news about obesity, we forget there are children that are underweight, possibly, aren't there? Might not. Very talented children who feel uncomfortable about that in front of their peers. Okay, sometimes they don't want to perform, they don't want to demonstrate. We just have a conversation that sometimes teachers use very able children to demonstrate a lot, and they may not feel comfortable about that and stop wanting to participate. Children with English or Welsh as additional language, so language barriers. Ethnic minority groups, all right, because there's a lot of... I know that locally, where we are, we don't have many children in the schools that wear specific clothing or have to for religious or cultural reasons, but if you're going to be working in Cardiff or London or anywhere else in the UK, you're going to be coming up against those issues. How do you ensure that your PE allows children to have flexibility in what they wear? All right. Late or early physical maturers. You mentioned a child who was more mature and more physically developed in the class, was stronger, and that was an issue in PE. All right. Children with asthma and illnesses. Low self-esteem, poor self-image, lacking in confidence. Because it's very visible, isn't it, PE? We all see we can't hide that in our books if we're not doing very well. So if you're lacking in confidence, you're up there on display being shown. Children with long-term injuries, trying to come back, be rehabilitated back into it. Children that are new to the school, don't know people. Again, it's very visible. It's a lot of instructions out loud. They have to be able to, they don't know you, they don't know people. When they're choosing partners, getting into groups. Children with eating disorders, from strict religious backgrounds, girls who feel being good at sport makes them look unfeminine. All right, there's a lot, perception about that. Boys who like dance might have peer pressure and be perceived by others. Okay, so boys being worried about being hurt and things like rugby, when that's not perceived to be something, they should be worrying about. So the list goes on and on, doesn't it? So actually, if we keep thinking in this way, who are we talking about in our class? Everyone. We're talking about everyone, aren't we? And that's why we need to move away. Although we start with thinking it's about disability, it's about coordination disorders, and we will talk about how we can fine-tune it. You have to keep in your mind that actually every PE lesson I do is about including every pupil. Because you have to in every lesson in your class, in every subject, don't you? PE is no different. All right, so always be aware that it's not just about a child that you can see with a walker frame or a visual impairment. Actually, probably there's a large percentage of children in that class are struggling as well. And it might not be every week, but some weeks, So what are the main sort of barriers then? What are barriers for these children? The teacher can be. By what then? The instructions I gave you for the warm-up, weren't they? So the language that I use. Equipment, physical access to the building.
Equal pairing. If you have got somebody who's very, very strong, you don't necessarily, if you're doing, say, a gym activity, you're not going to put them with someone who's kind of quite slight and maybe can't actually.
Okay, so my classroom management and class organisation needs to be well thought out, doesn't it?
Additional adults.
Sorry?
Additional adults.
Use of supporting adults. How often do we see a learning assistant goes off to listen to readers when you come to PE, when actually if the child's got a language problem and they need support in understanding language and instructions, they need that in PE as much as anywhere else. So the use of support staff or not can be a barrier. What about your choice of activity? If I teach skills that are specific for a sport all the time, there's always going to be some children because of the choice of activity and the way I do it. Uniform, kit, perhaps not such a huge issue at primary school, but can be. Bigger issue in secondary school, especially with girls, but be flexible. And it's really nice that all children come in PE kit and there's a school uniform. But if that's stopping someone taking part, if children are missing swimming week on week, ask them why. There might be a reason. It might be actually as simple as they maybe have really bad eczema or psoriasis and they don't want to be in a bathers, and say, well, why don't you wear, let's look at something that's safe and long sleeve for you to swim in, and they'll start coming. So things like that, that being flexible about all of those things. Just if you keep it in your head that it's all pupils and the range of things that could be upsetting them. What's the best way of finding out then what children in your class are finding difficult, why they might not be participating, or what they'd like to do to help them participate more?
Ask them.
Talk to them and ask them. And remember, when you have children come into class, whatever the range of ability, if you know your learner, you'll know what they can do. And people say, oh, you know, children come in, the classic example is if a child is in a wheelchair, has a walker frame, and someone will say to the LSA, oh, what can she do? Well, ask the people, what can you do? What do you like to do in PE? What was good for you? What sort of equipment will help you to be able, this is what I'm planning to do. What do you need for us to do to make it easier for you to do that? So listen to the learners as well, which you do, don't you, in the classroom all the time. What we're going to do now is think about what was the learning outcome possibly for that chest pass. Okay, I was teaching you a chest pass. If I put that in national curriculum terms maybe, what would that be? Learning to do what? Send and receive, learn a pass. So let's just look at how else then could we deliver that same learning outcome. Learning to send and receive. This shouldn't be anything new to you because this is the way that I normally would deliver PE. So this should be easy peasy for you, isn't it? All right, so let's think about first of all the warm-up activity. Let's all get in a space. Let's think about my language. Just push it over the other way. That's it, great, thanks. Right, so let's do that warm-up again. All right, this time I want you to travel or move using all of the space. And we start off fairly slowly and then we're going to speed up. Are you ready? And off we go. So travel, use all the space. Show me changes of direction. As you start to warm up, you can speed up. That's it, changing direction. We'll change speed a little bit. Maybe travel in different ways. Good, watch where you're going. And stop. Okay, so language-wise, what's the language I'm using?
Change direction.
Change direction. First command was? Travelling or moving. So travelling and moving, does that enable anyone to travel and move? Anyone you could think of that couldn't do that? Anybody could travel or move in whatever way, whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they're using a walker frame, or whether they're travelling on the floor. They're travelling or moving, aren't they? So that's great, good. Okay, then so what I'd like you to do now is find a partner, and this time you can choose. We're going to learn how to send and receive. We're going to learn how to pass the ball. So what I'd like you to do is choose a ball. You can choose any of them from the netball bags or from the bags and hoops and boxes over there that you'll feel comfortable to use, and go into a space. Okay, make sure you're in a nice big space over here. Use all the space. Okay, so with your partner now, I want you to pass the ball to your partner, and you can choose whichever way you want to pass the ball. Are you ready? And off we go. Pass the ball to your partner. Okay, good, and stop. All right, now then I'm going to time you for 30 seconds, and I want you to count how many passes you can do in 30 seconds with your partner. Make sure you remember, okay? Are you ready? And off you go. And stop. Okay, so you've been passing. What can you do then? Because I'm going to time you in a minute and see if you can do more passes. What can you do you think, to be able to do more passes?
Closer.
You could stand closer together.
Think about the pass. Think about the pass that you're going to do.
Think about the type of pass. So choose the pass that's the quickest pass for you and your partner that you can do successfully, isn't it? If you don't do it successfully, what's going to happen? Lose time, the ball, chasing the ball. So choose your pass that you can do successfully. Stand closer. Anything else?
Different ball.
You could, so if you're not passing quickly with the ball you've got, you might want to change the equipment.
Bigger ball.
You might want to use a big yay, so you might just want to change it and see what you feel comfortable with. Anything else?
Make it as easy as possible for your partner. So target perhaps the hands.
Right, so make sure that your partner knows you're ready. Have a target for them to catch the ball. Eye contact. All right, so thinking about all of those things, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to have a conversation with your partner. Maybe swap equipment, try a few things, and then we're going to see if you can beat your score. And stop. Did you beat your scores? Yes. Okay, well done. Just come over and and sit down a minute, put the balls back in there. Did you all successfully learn to pass the ball? Yes. Did you feel that you improved your passing? Yeah. Did any of you end up using a chest pass? No. Some of you. So some of you ended up with the same outcome, but in a way that was inclusive. So you all chose different equipment. How did that feel?
It was good because it was your choice. So you were drawn to what you thought you would work best with, I think.
Okay, so are you happier with some of those? Why?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't so heavy, it's not so, I don't know, I just felt a little bit intimidated by this Joe throwing this big ball at me.
Some children might like rugby, for example, so they might choose the rugby ball. And some children might like netball, so they'll choose the netball.
Okay, so there's a range of equipment. What I'm going to do is just introduce you to something. You may have heard of it before, you may have heard of it in different forms. It's a way of differentiating and helping you to include all pupils. It's quite well known. It's STEP. Have you heard of STEP before? You might have heard of InSteps or STEPs. It's quite well known across the whole of the UK. Youth Sport Trust use it. It's on a lot of the Dragon Sports cards you might have seen in schools. It's a way of thinking. So what it looks at is it's there to remind you. And at the end of the session today, I'm going to give you all a little key ring to use when you're teaching with STEP on each of them, with the main points on it, so you can have that as a little reminder when you're planning and delivering your PE. So it looks at space, task, equipment, oh look at that, useless writing, people, and the people, the groupings. All right, so space-wise, did I do anything particular with space with you in that session? I didn't need to for that. What if I needed to have some children in a particular marked out area? Do you remember our gardens that we've used in PE? We've used our little gardens. But if I'd have given you that task to pass with your partner in a garden, then I could have used that again for more differentiation. So for example, if on that extreme, remember I said it's an inclusive way of teaching, so you don't have to tweak it. Then if you get a child who does have a really specific need for something extra, that enables you to do it. So by using those gardens, you could then have a child, if you've got a child with visual impairment, they need a marked out area, don't they? They need something clear. So you would have that marked out area for all pupils, but then you know that that child knows where their boundaries are. They can be shown them first, use bright markers for it. They can have specific equipment within that area that they need. For example, what would you use in passing maybe? If you've got visually impaired pupil.
You should have a bit of noise in it.
You can use, right, so you can use bells. And I've got equipment, and right the way through we'll be looking at stuff, so you've got equipment that is specific for that. Or just even brightly coloured, because pupils aren't necessarily going to be what we call V1, completely blind in your class, but they could have a range of visual needs. So the bright coloured, the fact that you had a range of bright coloured equipment, for all of you, means that all pupils have that choice. If they don't see very clearly, if they want something to have more time. So by using the gardens, you can then differentiate and allow children that space then for whatever support you need in there. So space and the way you use it. If you've got children whose coordination isn't as good, are you going to have a smaller space or a bigger space? Bigger, why?
More room for error.
Yeah, because they've got more time, isn't it? They've got more room, they've got more time, so you can use bigger, slower equipment for them. For your very able pupils, in terms of learning to pass, you maybe want to be giving them small equipment in smaller spaces, so they're having to be very skillful. So you've got that whole range just by altering the size of that space that they're going to be using. Okay, so space is about that. Task. We talked about that, didn't we? The task that you give. If you give a nice open task, which was you were developing their skills for passing, it doesn't matter if you're not a really skillful netball player or a really skillful rugby player, because you can pass in any way you like. I didn't tell you you had to chest pass, did I? I said pass the ball to your partner. So some of you were kicking, some of you were rolling it. So whatever ability, you're able to pass the ball. Can any of you think of any pupils that you've worked with that in a passing task would need more adaptation to the task? Or would they all be able to do that?
I find particularly talented, I come across some boys on teaching prac, very good cricketers who represent their country in cricket. So obviously with a task like that, you'd use really perhaps even squash balls or definitely tennis balls.
Yeah.
Perhaps narrow it down to use one hand to send and receive, just to try and narrow it down and make the task more difficult for them.
Okay, what about them using their weaker hand?
Yeah.
Because that's probably something they don't practice doing as much. They need, you know, the better they can be with both hands, even for their cricket, that's going to be good for them. So weaker hand, a cricket ball, a small, you're right. So those are the sort of things that you could be doing. Okay, so the task, equipment-wise, now the equipment is endless. And what I've brought out here for you today is a range of stuff. I wanted to show you these because these are really useful bits of equipment. You may have seen them out in my lectures with me before. Plus balls, they're paper. They're a slow speed ball. They're amazing because, unlike a balloon, you see if you see little children using balloons, a balloon doesn't bounce in a regular way, does it? So it doesn't behave like a ball, whereas these do. So this plus ball travels slowly. What that means is that children have got lots of opportunity to develop their hand-eye coordination because they've got a really high success rate. It's really useful with children with visual impairment as well because it travels slowly and it's colourful. They can pick it out. It gives them time. We'll talk about that in a second because what I want you to do, and people, your groupings, we talked about that, didn't we? Use of support staff, use of other pupils, isn't it? Who do I group pupils with? Do I put my more able with my less able? Perhaps, depends on what tasks they're going to do. Do I put them with their best friends? Perhaps. If I've got children whose issue is communication and working together, I have to group them really carefully, don't I? I was talking to a group of teachers just this week on some inset who were doing adventurous activities and talking about how to include children on the autistic spectrum who found it difficult to work with other children, and we were talking about doing cooperation and team building games. I'm saying how important it is that they identify one or two pupils that pupil is happy to be with initially and gradually increase the number of pupils that they are able to work with, even if that just ends up being one or two others on a very short timescale. Participation rates in general are a big part of the sort of national agenda. It's always in the press, that people are not active enough, the big health agenda. And one of our sort of key vehicles for raising participation rates is high quality physical education, and in order to be high quality it has to be inclusive. If it's not inclusive, it's not high quality PE. So if our trainees are not going out and including all the pupils in their sessions, then there's a danger that there are going to be an increasing number of adults who don't like physical education, who don't engage with sport or don't have the skills to do that. So it's absolutely vital that they're able to ensure that all children have the opportunities to learn in a physical context, to develop physical skills and enjoy it as well, so that they will then engage in activity as an adult for their own health and well-being. Okay, so just to recap what we've done, you hopefully should be able to identify some of the barriers that we face or some children face for PE, thinking about all of the children in your class all the time, and by using a range of equipment, looking at STEP, have some generic strategies. So just to sum it up really, curriculum physical education is inclusive by its nature. It's not the same as our extracurricular sporting activities because we're not looking at skill-specific things. We're talking about what learning children are doing in a physical environment. And as long as you focus on those learning outcomes, what do I want a pupil to learn? There shouldn't be any reason why anyone is excluded in that session, okay, because it is a process and your lessons should be looking at the learner. You should know your learner by getting to know your pupils, listening to those pupils and thinking about what do I actually want them to learn about in this session, okay? If you use open tasks, a range of equipment, allow a choice of response from pupils so they can choose it, they can answer how they feel like, and a choice of groupings, then the amount of actual adaptation you should need to do will probably have to be very small. Okay, STEP, space, task, equipment, people is there to help and remind you about how you can organise some of your lessons to allow for differentiation. Have you got any questions about anything that we've done in here today? Especially for those of you about to go out onto teaching practice, do you feel that there's some of the things that you can take from here and learn and use in school in the next few weeks? That'd be useful. Any questions about anyone?
What happens if you get to a school and they haven't got the equipment? For example, they haven't got the range of bats and balls and things like that. Where can you get the support from to get extra?
Right, well, obviously for us in college, we're very lucky because I have a huge range of equipment here so that I can show you what's available. Most primary schools should have good primary PE equipment, which should be beyond a net of footballs and netballs. They should have a range of soft, bright coloured, young child-friendly equipment. Now, if in the junior section of school they don't have it, it's worth asking in the infants, because quite often they do. If you're in a school and they simply haven't got that range of equipment, you're going to have to use what they've got initially. When you start in September, you're talking about now, are you? So what can you do? What can you do as a staff?
Request it.
Well, you can ask for it to be highlighted in school budget, can't you? Where can you get help for buying that stuff?
There's funding you can get as well, isn't there?
Right. There might be some
Maybe
funding you can
like
access,
Tesco.
but certainly supermarkets and large shops do vouchers
Dragon Sports.
for equipment. Sorry?
Dragon Sports, do they provide some equipment?
Dragon Sports bags have often got a range of equipment in them and may be kept in a cupboard just for Dragon Sport club time. But have a look and see, you might be able to get some of that out. Otherwise, you need to go to PTAs, try and get some fundraising. It's not hugely expensive to be able to start buying it, and it may be that you have to have a short-term, a medium-term and a long-term plan for how are we going to get this equipment in the school. The school council, the class council are very powerful in schools. Ask the children, show them some stuff. Would you like more of this sort of equipment? Let's look in the catalogues. Let the school council highlight what they need and let's have a priority list. Because if the school council are involved in it, then it's more like you can get the parents on side because it's what the children want. So yes, the schools do have obviously budget limitations, but it doesn't cost a huge amount each year to buy little bits at a time and gradually start to build that store of equipment up. And with lots of active playground projects going, lots of schools are buying that, and sometimes that, again, it might be shutting a cupboard for playtime when actually that's something you could be using all the time in the curriculum. So yeah, equipment is an issue and it's something that has to be addressed a stage at a time. Any other questions? What I've got for you as well to take from today, because obviously this is a huge issue and I can only talk really about generic strategies, and we can touch on things you can do to adapt things. For some further case studies to take away today, you've got a handout, you've got a little step keyring, but I've also got the Success for All CD-ROM. Now that's in virtually every school in the UK, probably sitting on a shelf in a lot of them. Okay, it's a fantastic resource. It shows loads of case studies of children at all key stages doing a range of activities with a range of abilities and how they're included in the curriculum. There's also a copy of Don't Forget Me DVD, which is looking at outdoor and adventurous activities for children with a range of needs. Okay, now in light of our new curriculum, with adventurous activities being statutory again, now that's going to be a really useful resource for you as well. So that looks at loads of case studies. They're both huge resources with lots on them. So you take those away with you as well today. And I've got one little thing I just want to leave you as a final thought from today. When we talk about the environmentally focused approach to additional needs, there are no students with learning difficulty, only adults with teaching difficulties. But no pressure for you starting in your jobs in September. Okay, it is a sobering thought, isn't it, actually? Okay, and if any of you want to do further reading and have further guidance, an essential book for you, and there's a bibliography in your handout. Phil Vickerman's book, that one there, it will have all of the theories and things that we've talked about some of today. That is an absolutely fantastic read for you if you're interested in this area of work. There are some other inclusion books, they're more generic, but there's also Wright and Sugden, David Sugden, Professor Sugden's book, and those two there are really useful books for you. They're on the bibliography if you want to do some further reading and research to help you in school. Okay, but I hope today's been useful for you. Don't forget your handouts are on the table on the way out, and thank you for turning up this afternoon. Okay, thanks. I think at the end of the lecture they were able to understand some of the key principles of inclusion, the fact that it's not just about children with additional learning needs, that it's the way they approach their teaching full stop right from the word go that will make it inclusive. And
from the way that they worked and grouped themselves and devised some games, I think they've understood about using a range of equipment and grouping themselves into small groups. I think they've perhaps got some good useful strategies to take out on teaching practice, especially in like the fact that I know that some of them will be going into settings where they have got a range of needs to deal with, and it was a concern to them before the lecture, so that should have given them a range of things to go and use out in schools.